Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Week That Was. My name is Saeed Khan, and I'm so glad that you're joining us. Now, March is supposed to enter like a lamb and leave like a lion, but nobody told this March that memo.
It's the other way around.
It
Supposed
seems
to
like it's
enter like
the
a
other way
lion
around.
and
So
leave like a lamb.
hopefully it will not become, I don't know what the hell's even worse than a lion, jaguar. But maybe it can hopefully be a bit of a reversal going on. Yes, March Madness now has a whole new moniker going on. With us, we have Deadline Detroit's own Nancy Derringer reminding us that March has entered with a lion. Hi, Nancy. Looks like your digs are now not mobile or portable anymore.
I am back. I am back in the old home office, which I have been cleaning aggressively, which is, I think I need to add some furniture because I can feel my voice echoing a little bit in here, but that's okay.
Well, I think there's going to be a sale because apparently IKEA closed down in Russia. So maybe we'll get some over that spillover Billy Ski bookshelves. We're also joined by former mayoral chief of staff and head of Moment Strategies, Alexis Wiley.
Hi.
Attorney Joel Sklar. How you doing, Joel?
Doing great. Good morning.
And as always, we have the editor of Deadline Detroit. We have Allan Lengel here. How's it going, Allan?
Hey, good to be here, as they say.
So somebody told me there's something going on in the Ukraine, and things
just a little something.
A little something. Things are quite fluid. Even my car was noticing with the gas prices going up. What's going on, and what does this all mean for all of us? Looks like, I think, we're all kind of veterans of the and survivors of the Cold War. Is this a redo?
Yeah, I think it's worse.
It's a hot war for starters.
One, we weren't watching, the Cold. It's so weird to be watching a war, and it's also weird to not be doing anything that we're doing so little. We're watching, and they're just destroying this country. I was watching the other night. It's just so upsetting. And I said, God, I got to do something. And so I donated $100 to UNICEF for Ukraine, for the Ukraine children. And I'm thinking, could you imagine, in the 40s, you start getting flashes about the Holocaust and, millions of Jews dying. And I'm like, I think I'll donate $100 to UNICEF to help out. It just feels like such a shallow gesture. You understand why the U.S. is not getting involved, and it's probably the smart thing to do, but it's so hard to stand there and watch people be murdered, watch countries be destroyed.
Your visceral response is, to be repulsed and to feel helpless, and to not understand. I don't understand what I'm watching, just the enormity of the suffering. Removed, and but this portends for escalation. I know that the nuclear facility bombed, from what I'm reading or hearing this morning on CNN. So the escalation here is absolutely terrifying to me. 70 years ago, this wasn't the issue, and it is now. And you have a madman or somebody who appears to be acting viscerally, not intelligently in Putin, and it's disturbing as hell.
So why is it that when somebody's acting this way, the first American impulse is to question their sanity? We've had a little bit of an experience with going into countries with questionable motivation, with questionable intel, and yet by and large we don't necessarily strap our own leaders up to a referendum on how sane they are. Alexis, you're nodding your head.
I agree with you 100%. Because it's kind of interesting to see that while we feel like the Western perspective is the dominant only perspective on what's happening, there's a wide range. There was a whole piece in the New York Times about really how some African countries and others who've built relationships with Russia are actually supportive of Putin and kind of feel like, one African leader brought up the example of when the USSR was trying to put weapons in Cuba, America went nuts. And when I guess the question of what, basically saying that's similar to what Putin's doing, not saying I agree with that, but I'm saying that there are a lot of different perspectives around what's happening. And maybe he is making a strategic move because he doesn't want NATO in his own backyard. Now, I think what is really touching a lot of people is watching how the Ukrainians are like, we're not going anywhere. Our president's going on TV with like a beard and a t-shirt from a bunker, like, come for me, I'm ready. Like, I mean, the level of like just straight up like guts that these people have. And like, you got old people who are like, give me a gun, get me a, vest and get me out there. That kind of stuff has gotten people fired up. So I think that there's a real, it's interesting to see that. I would be remiss if I did not mention one thing that has bothered me in seeing some of what's been happening is videos of African students and immigrants being pushed to the back of the line and not being allowed to get on the train. My hope is that the Ukrainians can figure out that like when there's something like this, you're all in it together. So I think we should, racism should probably take a back seat to everything that they're experiencing. But it's been amazing to watch.
So let's talk about that racism. So first of all, by the way, the former lead singer of Twisted Sister, Dee Snider, is actually very much in support of the fact that his iconic song, I know, Nancy, you love that term, iconic. This one's for you. That's you got to try to get in at least once every show. That We're Not Gonna Take It has been embraced as the Ukrainian second anthem in dealing with Putin. So there you go for pop culture from from the Cold War. But there's two elements of racism I think that are going on, Alexis. One, as you said, the visuals of Ukrainian nationals. These aren't just necessarily expatriates. A lot of people studying in Ukraine, especially in the medical schools from South Asia and from Africa, being turned away or being kept out of trains to bring them to safety in places like Poland and Romania. But also, it seems as though some of the coverage is showing tone-deaf reporters. There was a guy on CBS who tried, at least he tried with a few awkward disclaimers to say, well, this is happening in the Ukraine. We wouldn't expect it in Europe. I mean, it's not like it's someplace relatively less civilized like Iraq or, less European like Afghanistan. It's like ooba dooba.
I have a question about that, and I'm curious, and I don't doubt. Look, every country there's racism. Wherever there's different races, there's going to be racism. And some of that, I wonder, is it pure racism, or is it just like the bias against foreigners, saying our people first on the train, and they're more easily seen because there's not a lot of blacks in Ukraine, or if it's just pure out racism. I don't know.
Well, it's kind of like this. Back in the old days when you could cross the Blue Water Bridge with basically just a birth certificate and a driver's license, sometimes going with my buddies over to Toronto and being the only one who had to show his passport. Speaking a better American accent than those foreigners from Lapeer. Pardon me if I'm not still looking at the world through a little bit of a jaundiced eye. So I agree with you. I think it is certainly there are biases. But now, as you also said, with the world being able to see this in real time, you'd think that some of the people would have gotten with the program. Nancy, haven't heard from you.
That is the weird thing for me, is the real-time stuff and the social media aspect. Now, I know that 2011, the Arab Spring, was kind of the first social media war, but social media has gained influence and muscle in the decade since then. And to see, Ukrainians, soldiers, government officials releasing things like that photo array of the soldiers holding the cats, the cats of Ukraine. I mean, it's the propaganda alone is just fascinating. I mean, there's got to be, several doctoral theses in mass communications, kind of looking at the role all of this stuff is playing.
Well, I'm waiting for Hollywood to cash in on this with the real cats of Kharkiv, because that's a show waiting to happen.
Exactly, but it's just, and then seeing Zelensky, who kind of, it sounds like he sort of ran for president as something of a joke. I mean, he was an actor and a comedian, and was surprisingly elected, and has talked about growing in the job. I mean, I think it was Jon Stewart had a great line where he said, it's like watching Shecky Greene turn into Winston Churchill. It really is. So, that's the other thing that I find so, so strange. It's like, I have a friend that I have discussed Donald Trump with approximately 70 bazillion times, and we've talked over and over about how Trump missed so many opportunities to, be a mensch and be a better guy. It wouldn't have cost him anything, and he would have been reelected. I think the biggest thing is the masks. He refused to wear a mask because he thinks he's so vain. He thinks he's so handsome that it makes him look bad. And if he had worn a mask and said, "Let's all wear masks. I'll go first. Here's mine with the presidential seal on it," I think he would have been reelected in a landslide, but he wasn't. And Zelensky just is hitting all of his marks like a great actor. So
it's interesting. The Republicans, a lot of people say, "Oh, if Trump was in office, they wouldn't have done this because he's so crazy. They don't know if he would have pulled, hit the button, what nuclear weapons he might have used." But a more palatable explanation is that he was going to get rid of NATO. He had said that if he was reelected, he was going to get rid of NATO, which is exactly what Putin wanted, or he was going to quit NATO, which would have basically destroyed NATO. So
that's
I
exactly
think that's
right.
more of it. He was just a stooge for Putin.
Well,
Putin was just like, oh my God, this guy is perfect for Russia.
And the fact that he can just tell these bald-faced lies that anyone with the short-term memory longer than a toddler can recall is absolute bullshit. It just goes to show how, what the MAGA base is all about. I mean, talk about a cult. I mean, this is 1984. We're at war with Oceania. We've always been at war with Oceania.
This was also the guy who was trying to strong arm Zelensky.
Yes.
Into putting the dime on Hunter Biden,
right, and was withholding $400 million in military aid. I mean, this is like, does he think we don't remember this stuff? Apparently he does. So, anyway.
Well, I mean, even there seems to be a bit of dissension in the ranks over at Fox News regarding the coverage of this. I mean, on the one hand, we've got Tucker with the pom-poms for Putin. And then we've got people like Greg Gutfeld, whose I think mother-in-law is actually stranded in the Ukraine, and a few other co-hosts and regulars who are starting to decry the coverage coming out of there.
Well, and he's doing the same thing. Did you see that clip that he ran where he said, "Where would anybody get the idea that I was pro-Putin or pro-Russia?" And it's like, well, maybe these 10 to 15 video clips all gathered in the last week might kind of give people that idea. But there you go.
I mean, and at the same time, of course, with this really bad pun about putting on the Blitz, Wolf Blitzer and the rest of CNN just seems to have found the war that they've been craving for a while, with no fewer than, I think, 9 people on the ground. I think they're looking to bring Peter Arnett back and maybe put him at Chernobyl. Because he was so used to broadcasting from the Al Rashid Hotel. But is this just being too cynical that there seems to be a media frenzy going on?
Well, I think yes and no, right? People are fascinated by it. People are cheering for, again, the president who's in a T-shirt saying, "You're going to have to drag me out, dead for me to leave here," right? So there's like the drama of it. And then there's also the business of it, in that after Trump, everybody's ratings dropped. People are sick of talking about COVID. So that's not why they're tuning in. Now you got the next big thing, and somebody like a CNN, their ratings are garbage right now. So they're trying to figure out whatever they can do to increase their ratings. So you're going to see them going wall to wall with whatever people are most interested in and watching. And I think people on all sides of this conversation are really fascinated by what's happening in Russia, in Ukraine, and then watching, again, what does Russia do? Like, for you guys talk about everybody remembering the Cold War. To be honest, I don't remember the Cold War. It wasn't really a thing for me, born in the 80s. You don't really know like what that history was like. And now to kind of experience it and think, oh my gosh, like there's, what's Russia gonna do? Are we in a bad position? Like, what's happening? So I think it's just really kind of a crazy thing to watch.
Well, don't feel bad, Alexis. For you, it's age. For us, it was the drugs. I mean, there's always. But I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because in one of my classes, I just sort of walked in and flippantly said, I said, those desks that you've got there one day could save your life, because back in school during the Cold War, we used to have drills to hide under the desks, because that was going to take care of a 10 megaton bomb.
Yeah, the duck and cover drills. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say this about the media coverage. I mean, there's times I finally have to cut it off, but I am really, really curious. I feel like maybe as a journalist, my whole life, I like to stay on top of news and something so important. So I can't get enough of the reports. I want to see live reports. I want to see developments. I want to see what's going on. And at some point I cut it off and go, God, this is just too frustrating, too depressing. But I think there's a need for it, and the media set up these days to do live feeds, to have social media, to see. I mean, I watch a lot of CNN. I think CNN's probably doing the best coverage, but MSNBC is doing good. I watch a little bit of Fox here and there, but
CNN's reputation. I mean, CNN was built on worldwide coverage, so this is their sweet spot.
Right. And I think even between the two, the New York Times and the Washington Post, even though I normally read the Washington Post a lot more, I'm going to the New York Times more, because I think internationally, I think the Times just does a little bit.
They have some great reporters on the ground there too. I've said a million times on the show, I cut the cord years ago. I don't have cable, so I don't watch cable news. Last week, though, when I was on the road and I was in a hotel with cable, I did notice there is a woman at Fox who is a reporter. She's not a talking head host. She's on in the regular news, not the opinion stuff. Her name is Jennifer something, and apparently she's been there for some time. I Googled her because she was so good. I mean, she really seemed to know her stuff, and she was not afraid to correct people like Laura Ingraham and some of these other, clowns that they've got out there, sucking in the grandpa's eyeballs in prime time. So, Jennifer, what's her face? Kudos. So they're, everybody's doing the best they can. Yeah. But I'm still a print person.
And it's important. I mean, it's so important for the world to see this. I mean, Russia can't come out and say, issue bullshit statements when we're watching right there. We're watching it live. So.
Yeah. Well, and it's going to be interesting to see. I feel like the younger generation, when we're talking about CNN and everybody, I think that where people are getting their news is really what Ukrainians on the ground are sharing on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook, and really not as much Facebook, but really TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how much that unfiltered view, right, shapes perspective.
And why haven't the Russians knocked out their internet? Why haven't, of course, now we're kind of starting to learn that maybe the Russian army is not as fearsome as Vladimir Putin would like us to believe.
Any Afghan could have told you that, Nancy.
I'm reminded of a headline that ran, I think it was in the New Republic many, many years ago before the Soviet Union broke up, called Ivan the Terrible Soldier. And I think that's probably about right. So maybe they just haven't been able to. I mean, they were shooting at a nuclear power plant, and maybe who knows what they were aiming at, So,
well, I think Elon Musk has also helped save internet coverage by putting some of his satellites over the Ukraine and compensating for anything that Russia might do. So there you go.
This is news to me. This is probably because I wasn't paying attention to cable. Yeah.
Well, that's because you got Verizon. You don't have Elon Musk's coverage network. The one thing, Alexis, you were mentioning about young people that certainly freaked out a lot of the students that we had. Was the whole idea about Putin putting Russia's nuclear system on high alert. And we had a webinar on Monday where we had 256 people log in. And we're fortunate because we've got some amazing faculty at Wayne State who are experts on Russia and Eastern Europe. And Aaron Reddish in the history department, who's our Russia expert, he, in 90 seconds, allayed people's concerns. He said, look, we've got DEF CON here in the United States, not the record company, but, you know, the defense configuration.
That'd be great. If that was okay.
And we have 5 levels. 5 means you're at total peace. 1 is at total war. You might be a little bit too young for this movie, Alexis, but War Games with Matthew Broderick taught us all that.
Not too young for that.
Okay, no, I'm kind of figuring this out now.
Yeah.
And then he explained that Russia's got 4 levels, and Putin moved it from 4 to 3. So there's still 2 levels left. By the way, here's a quiz for you. What is our current DEF CON level in the United States? Don't say orange, that's TSA.
I don't know. What is it?
We're currently at 3.
I would have guessed 3.
Yeah, we went to
So
3.
4 is total peace, you said?
No, 5 in America is total peace. 1 is total war. So we were at 4 until Putin dropped it to 3, and then we said, well, if he can do it, then
anybody can.
And don't we have the whole nuclear thing? I mean, and I know nothing, literally, absolutely nothing about anything related to nuclear anything. But my understanding, my very
you have a microwave, don't you? Sorry.
Exactly. Like that's the extent, right? But no, I thought that in order, there are a lot of steps that can prevent before someone can drop a nuclear bomb. There's all of these different protections we have from somebody doing something super duper crazy. It's not like Russia can just come get us. I mean, that's literally where my head is. I'm really hoping Russia just can't come get us.
So Allan, I mean, you remember when Nixon put us on nuclear alert on a lark back in the 70s, right?
I'm trying to remember now.
I think it was 73, and he was quite inebriated.
I'm not. Tell me a little bit more. Refresh my memory.
Telling you, it was a drug.
I was going to say 73. Might have been a good year for Allan.
I was around.
I think it was in 73 that he put the country on nuclear alert. I think one night he'd been drinking too much, or he was of altered states, and there was the contingency. I mean, we've got the Joint Chiefs of Staff here who do more than just act like a caddy saying, "Are you sure you want to use the driver on that, sir?" And we know that Russia does as well. So there are those systems in place. And then we've also, I think this is also news now, which shouldn't be surprising, we've reestablished the hotline between Washington and Moscow so that there's no ambiguities and there's no surprises. So let's see where that goes with it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, quite a bit. And I'm sure it's going to, unfortunately, intensify, especially as gas, they're saying we should be prepared for $5 a gallon within the next month. So there you go. And see, if that darn COVID wasn't going away, we could have just sat at home. But by the way, what about all the people who are like, Ukraine, Boris Johnson, Prince Andrew, the Cuomo brothers, Jeff Zucker? There's a lot of people who are kind of breathing a sigh of relief that the eye of Sauron is no longer on them. But I digress. So anyways, just to show you that this show is not just about show or talk, we've got some audio video for you. Michael, cue it.
You do not have to wear those masks. I mean, please take them off. Honestly, it's not doing anything, and we got to stop with this COVID theater. So if you want to wear it, fine, but this is ridiculous.
So those are clips from Tuesday's State of the Union address. And then if you're wondering, how do we segue from that to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and his worried about Kabuki theater? We've got the fact that he is quite proud of defying what he thought was the White House's request for the Florida National Guard to provide protective services for the State of the Union, even though that was a request made by the DC Metropolitan Police, not from the White House. The other clip, of course, was of Colorado Congresswoman Lauren Boebert and her colleague Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia deciding that they wanted to reprise the roles of Cy and Am, the Siamese cats from Lady and the Tramp, by heckling President Biden at every conceivable notice, something which I think has precedent with, who was it? You Lie, the South Carolina congressperson when Obama was speaking, and also Judge Alito needing to show that he had a pulse by shaking his head at the State of the Union as well. I mean, what the hell is going on with the State of the Union? And oh yeah, by the way, what about the speech?
I thought
he stood.
Yeah, go ahead.
He made it through. I was thrilled. He didn't clap. That's all I was looking for. Just make it through. But I thought the content was fine. His delivery is Joe's delivery. It's never that smooth. You know, he has difficulty at times with words, but the content was fine. You know, he made it through. He survived. And the lack of decorum, you know, in that speech by the members of Congress is just a reflection of where we are. You know, there is no decorum anymore.
You mean right, the House of Commons?
And in fairness, I think we always talk about when Republicans do wild, crazy stuff. Let's not forget when Nancy Pelosi made a show of ripping the speech.
I agree. The lack of decorum, it goes both ways.
Yeah.
But the lack of
and this is from a hardcore Democrat.
Yourself.
I'm just saying, like, we got to get to not acting shady towards each other.
The norms are now no longer include mutual respect. Right, that's gone. Right. Now it's mutual contempt, and it reflects itself in the manifests by these outbursts of idiocy, and it again, it's just our structures are falling apart. The trajectory is down. This has been my theme for years. And it's difficult to see, but it's going to get worse. We're not going to be coming closer together.
We spent all that time trying to free ourselves from the British, and now we look like the British House of Commons.
To me, it looked like Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene, like they were like freshmen from Michigan State who were driving down to Florida and said, "Hey, let's stop in at the State of the Union and have some fun." It just looked like, what are they doing there even?
I think speaking when he was talking about his son who died, right? Like, there's just like a point where it's like, that's something that is we all know what it's like to lose someone, and just that basic decency of respect of what that is to be human, right? And you're yelling and being like, that to me is just the depth of just disgustingness. And
they're not decent people. They're not decent.
Right. Exactly. It's totally indecent.
I think Biden brings that stuff up about his son Beau and all that stuff. I think he brings it up to say, I'm a human being, you're a human being, you have children, I have children. We can all, let's meet I thought he did a really good job. I thought it was a fairly inspirational speech. I agree with Joel. You're happy that he seemed to have the stamina, which was, good. I think every time, people wonder, see Joe walking in like Grandpa Joe. But I thought the speech was pretty good. It was pretty positive, and he really worked hard on trying to unite. And so I thought he was good at it. So
again, people have clearly short memories. I mean, he's Joe Biden, not Gerald Ford, when it comes to being able to make it up onto the stage well. And the other thing, I suppose, if we want to look at this glass half empty, neither Boebert nor Taylor Greene yelled, "Let's go, Brandon." So
yeah, that's great.
Nancy.
I just wanted to say that I saw that clip of DeSantis, shaming the kids behind him into taking off their masks. And there was one kid who left his on, and it was the black kid on the far. Well, it would have been stage right, our left, as we look at that clip. And I thought it was like, go.
I'd like to see Ron DeSantis go through a COVID ward in one of the hospitals and go to the doctors and say, "Take those silly masks off. What are you doing?"
I mean, I just was like, that kid. That's the kid that I want to have a beer with.
The next president of the United States.
Isn't he? If the entire issue about the mask is freedom and being imposed, the government's going to make us do things. Aren't the kids free to wear that mask? Isn't that what freedom is? The choice to make that choice. Why would he denigrate a choice that you're free to make when his whole position is you can't impose your choices on me?
Right.
Yeah, but Joel,
And
I don't think that DeSantis is pro-choice.
He's clearly not.
Right.
But it's disturbing. I mean, just the the hypocrisy of it. The kids are free
Yeah.
to wear. I wear a mask, and I'm continuing whether I have to or not because it's my choice to do so, and it's not oppressive in any way.
Right. It's literally the argument.
To denigrate my choice to
Right,
wear a mask.
right.
You don't wear one, fine. That's you. I'm gonna. It's my call. And to denigrate that I couldn't believe it. It's like what
They literally say, I should have the freedom to do what I want with my body, but you can't have the freedom to do what you want with your body.
Right.
Like literally, they say the same thing in like
Correct.
the same breath. It's absurd.
Right. It drives me insane. So
Yeah.
During my little drive around in the South, I can tell you that once you get south of the Ohio River and you wear a mask, outside of a few places in like Atlanta, which has a CDC and people who are generally, live a little closer together, you're looked at like some kind of freak. In fact, at the breakfast bar in that hotel that I was in last Friday, this little girl, she maybe 4 or 5, she had a very fanciful braid in her hair, which led me to believe that she was probably from, I don't know, I got kind of a hardcore Christian Latter-day Saints kind of buzz off of her. And she honestly stared at me like I was some kind of freak. I mean, she was just like watching me walk by with my KN95 on. So I got the feeling she doesn't see those very often. Anyway.
You know what was so funny? So you guys know, like last time I was on, I think I was still in LA because I'd taken like a whole month and like everybody was like, super masked up. I got back to Michigan and literally I was like, nobody's got a mask on here.
Yeah.
It's so different, like wherever you go. And especially now that like people are like, no more masks in school. You're all good. It's like, just poof. It's gone.
Is it just denial, like an alcoholic who doesn't acknowledge, the illness or the disease? Is that what we're in now? Or are we just in like, to hell with this? We're going to deny that COVID really exists. I mean, walking around like COVID doesn't exist isn't realistic.
Pretty fatuous.
We still have 1,000 daily infinfections in Michigan.
Yeah, and
right.
the deaths are, sometimes we're having like 100 a day. People dying. It's still happening. And I think Joel's right. Is that we've just decided, and it's election year, and so a lot of the politicians want to be able to say, hey, particularly the Democrats don't want to be accused of suppressing and taking away people's liberty. And they're jumping on the bandwagon. And, there was a doctor a couple of weeks ago, I think on CNN, who was saying, hey, people aren't, it's political now. It's not based on the science of what we're doing. It's, I don't know.
Well, it's going to be seen as a win-win, isn't it? I mean, those who were diligent are going to say, QED, we did the right thing, we survived. Those that didn't and yet still survived are going to say, see, we didn't need to really do anything.
Right.
I don't know if it's really going to move the needle, but Alexis, you mentioned this whole idea about coming back to a maskless Michigan. One of the big protests that was planned was to emulate our Canadian brethren by having a trucker convoy protest to Washington to gum up the Beltway, which thankfully our fair Nancy was able to evade from her time.
I think everybody's going to be able to evade it because I think that thing is falling apart at the seams.
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, in fact, it is so underrepresented that even Fox decided it wasn't worth their time to cover the 5 trucks that showed up into DC, which the last time I checked is pretty much how many trucks you'll find on a normal day in DC clogging up the Beltway. So is this then, notwithstanding Ukraine also dominating the news cycle, is COVID now just passé as a protest vehicle?
I would say so.
Yeah.
I think that we're at a point. I mean, and I have kind of complicated feelings around it, right? I can get that when you think about what's happened in the country, so many people had COVID, and they are now kind of feeling like, look, I had it, I made it, and I've got a level of immunity for a few months. So I think people are just like, look, I can't shut anything else down. I can't deal with my kid not being able to go to school. Let's just realize that, like, if you want to get vaccinated, you can do it. If you choose not to, that's on you as well. And we just treat it as like now another thing that is on our list of things of health issues that we're going to be facing for years to come. So I think that, and I think there's also just fatigue. I mean, all the research shows, I think, Charlie had a piece that I was in Deadline Detroit that I think ran yesterday or this morning that talked about some of the research around what public attitudes are right now around COVID, and people are tired and they want to move on. And I think we are at when you look at what's happened in other pandemics, the fact that, yes, our positive rates are still, 1,000 people a day, whatever, but the deaths are so much lower, right? If they had testing at like when there was the Spanish flu, I think this would have been when people were kind of like, I think I may have said that a little bit wrong, but bottom line, like, look, we're at a point where we're at the end of this and we're all agreeing we're at the end of it. And even if we kind of aren't, people are like, we are going to treat it as if it's the end because we can't emotionally and mentally take any more.
Right.
I think this idea, Alexis, that you're mentioning is really important, that I think people have become used to the idea of living with it. And by the way, none of us were around during the Spanish flu, so that's also important for you to know.
But don't ask me any questions about it, man.
Alan, you don't have a story about that? There's no Spanish flu story coming? Because you have stories on
Back
everything.
then, we worried about
every single thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you think about it, we haven't had any news of a variant in months, not since Omicron, and even the subvariant of Omicron seems to be manageable with current vaccines. So there is certainly some guarded optimism for that. But along with,
let me just explain like how we've dealt with COVID or where we are now. Yeah, for 2 years, I've been on Zoom for every court appearance. I've had to appear, I think, once in federal court. I have an argument in the Sixth Circuit next Thursday, and I have to personally appear. And they were doing those by Zoom. So it's just, the reality is that institutionally a decision has been made to move ahead. You're going to come on down. We're not. These Zoom hearings have been great. They've been convenient for everybody. But you're going to come down, and you're going to stay in a hotel. You're going to come into court. You're going to be without a mask. Institutionally, we have moved on. And I think that institutions need to be more disciplined. And I think it's a little bit dangerous that we're being so flippant about something we really don't fully understand yet. And that's my concern.
And you're also going to have some Skyline chili while you're down there in Cincinnati.
Absolutely. My favorite.
I
love
Skyline
chili.
Delicious.
And on top of the chili on top of the spaghetti.
Yeah. They do and then cheese,
so
like cheddar or mayo, whatever.
It's like almost sweet. Skyline chili is.
It is. And it's a cinnamon,
got like,
kind of a
it's
cinnamon
got like a little
chili.
chocolate element.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so
They do a
good.
nice job.
You either love it or you hate it.
It's like mole.
It's mole light, like mole-ish.
I'll put a plug in from American Coney Island. Every on Punchki Day, they have a Punchki with a hot dog. Has anyone ever tried that?
Oh my God! Did you have
no,
to,
but okay.
Here we are rhapsodizing over something that's actually good to eat, and you have to bring that up. Come on.
Hey.
Okay, I have one good thing though. Detroit City's distillery. I tried their Punchki vodka the other day. It was so good. It was so good. Like people left and went and bought bottles from the distillery Eastern Market. It was delicious.
It's like drinking candy.
Yeah.
It was like candy. It was literally a Jolly Rancher in my mouth.
I need more.
Does the lard just sort of settle down to the bottom of the glass?
Yeah, what is
scrape the roof of your mouth with your tongue?
Alexis, what is the flavor? Is it the filling?
Raspberry punchki.
Oh, okay. So you get
like a raspberry.
So basically, it's raspberry. It's not like
Yeah.
They can't really capture the taste of the pastry.
You know,
at all, so.
Nancy, you're kind of killing the buzz on this. It's supposed to be punchki.
Right.
Like, let's just accept it's the punchki, okay? There's a little punchki on the bottle at the bottom, little picture of it with a little bite.
Adorable.
Totally fair. I yield.
That's the other hand, Nancy.
Such a journalist.
Punchki's
Such
the
a getting
chaser.
down to the facts, the reality of it.
Right. It's
Oh,
like,
there's so many varieties. Raspberry is my favorite, though. So there you go.
It's very good.
By the way, did everyone have one on Tuesday?
No.
I did not.
I
Usually
had
you
one
go,
last
you work in an
Saturday.
office. If you're working in an office, there's always
Yeah, I had
someone
one
bringing
last
it.
Saturday, and I regret to inform you that other than the raspberry filling, it was disappointing. So
I
but that's okay.
thought I had one. I had like a bite of one. I thought it was kind of nasty. I also don't like donuts. So like just to tell you, unless they're like, so I don't like anything like that. Like they're just not my jam.
What's
And
wrong
the
with you?
Ready to punch
You
people.
I know. I'm sorry. I
Who doesn't
only
like
I like
donuts?
cookies and brownies.
I'm
That's
I'm,
it.
I'm still
Okay.
sitting Shiva for Dutch Girl Donuts and
Seriously.
Woodward.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
may her
sorry.
memory be a blessing.
Hey, Alan, hey, Alan, you need to come on up to the northern areas like Rochester and Troy, where they have red or Naps donuts.
Those are great.
Naps donuts.
Really?
Okay.
All right.
Naps does a good job. So there's a plug for
Good to
Naps.
know.
In fact,
Good to
they take Punchki Day so seriously. It's owned by a Chinese American family that there were no donuts available there on Tuesday. It was just Punchki.
Wow.
Yeah.
100%
I like that.
punch.
I don't
Committed.
Kind
care
of
what anybody
discriminated
says.
against
A
the other
punchki
pastries.
is a donut. I don't care. You can talk about whether it's deep fried or whatever. It is a donut, so that's just fine.
Now
Anyway.
that's the buzzkill you were dreading, Alexa. That right there.
Okay.
So let's while we're on the state of Michigan, Attorney General Dana Nessel is arguing at the Supreme Court that sexual orientation is covered by the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act, something which we would have thought perhaps was intuitive, but apparently it is a gaping hole in jurist minds. Where do we see this one going?
Well, I think if they follow what the Fed is doing, which they should, because that's persuasive authority, and when Michigan courts look to Civil Rights Act, they look to the federal statutes and their interpretations. Those statutes are remedial. They're supposed to be broadly interpreted to protect people who, different sexes and orientations. I think that's inherently part of sex. So I think the Michigan Supreme Court is going to acknowledge that Elliott Larson expands and that is more inclusive to include sexual orientation, as it should be. A lot of the sexual orientation issues, they deal with stereotypical, how we see men and women in traditional roles. And courts started looking at that to determine why sexual orientation was protected. It's because it's based that, a man should be with a woman should be with a man, that a man should act a certain way, should be masculine, not feminine. And those stereotypes is exactly what gives rise to racism and to sexism and to ageism. And the courts, I think, are going to expand the civil rights laws to allow people to not be discriminated against or retaliated against because of sexual orientation. And we should be punishing people for what they are innately. That is completely wrong. And I think that the Supreme Court will acknowledge that.
From a 14th Amendment perspective and equal protection, Joel, has sexual orientation been declared or deemed to be a suspect group?
No. Not yet.
Okay.
I mean, I think it could be argued that, but there has been, that's not true. There's been 14th Amendment arguments for the case, that allowed same-sex marriage. That was a 14th Amendment argument. So to say that it's not, that's not so. It was a basis for the decision years ago.
That might be fundamental right? I mean, I forget. It's been 7 years now since Obergefell versus Hodges.
And I haven't read it in 7 years.
Fundamental right. But I mean, because if you're a suspect group, then you could claim that there needs to be greater government scrutiny to discriminate.
Right. And traditionally, like the 14th Amendment has just been race. That's traditionally been a protected class, and why the 14th Amendment came into being. So, if you're a constitutionalist, you're going to say, no, it just applies to races. That's it. But I think if you're a realist and understand that the Constitution breathes and evolves and lives, then of course it covers sexual orientation. How can it not?
Which constitutional law does with gender being a intermediate standard of review.
Correct.
So, I mean, there's definitely past precedent to allow for sexual orientation to be regarded as one commanding a higher level of review, right?
And it should. It should. There's no reason to punish people because of their sexual orientation. And that's, in fact, if we don't have a law that prevents it, it's exactly what happens.
Do you think it would be an issue in the midterms? Yeah, Nancy.
Oh, I was just going to say, I fully agree with Joel. I mean, I think this is such a no-brainer. And in fact, it became, it was almost remedied legislatively a few years ago in the state legislature, but they hung up on the transgender question. I believe the speaker, who was Jace Folger maybe at the time, said, okay, sure, LGB, but no T. They thought transgender people was a bridge too far. And to their credit, the community that was the LGBT community said, you take all of us or you don't get any of us. And since then, I think Joel's right. I mean, I think that the attitudes around, sexual orientation, homosexuality, whatever, even transgender are changing so quickly. And it's just, this is a Democratic majority Supreme Court. I just don't see this as being, it's going to be slam dunk.
Yeah, I'd be amazed if they didn't expand.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay, we got consensus on that one. How many times did you see that on the McLaughlin group?
I ask you, Elder Clift. Go ahead.
Wrong. Check them on. So Ford has decided to go ahead and trifurcate. Our one of the big three over in Dearborn has decided that they're going to be splitting into 3 different divisions, looking at EV being one, and then a couple of others. Smart move. Do you think that this is adapting to the times that are changing? Ford is going to come out being a lean, mean fighting machine by, it looks like, getting rid of $2 billion in waste.
$3 billion.
3 billion. I stand corrected. So that means a few
billion.
more people off the rolls.
A lot of billions. I think.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, Eric Starkman, one of our columnists, has written about this, and his thought is that they're going to split up. That Ford is eventually going to take the EV thing down to Tennessee. They're going to split it up, and that the footprint here, the headquarters, is going to shrink. It's going to grow down there. And, that's a possibility. I don't know what that's going to mean for Michigan. I mean, we'd like to think, that these car companies are loyal to the state, but we saw in the 80s, they certainly weren't. It was all profit, and they were like, why do we owe Michigan anything? The attitude has seemed to have changed, but I think with Farley, I think he's a very global kind of guy. I'm not sure his heart is here in Michigan.
So I would push back a little bit in that.
Sure.
When you look at what they're doing on Michigan Avenue with the train station and creating that innovation district, I think what they're trying to do is, I think they see that section of the business as being the future, right? Getting into mobility, self-driving vehicles, all of that technology connection, collaboration with Google coming in. I think they are going to really be investing their energy into, EV and all that kind of stuff. And I think the question is, what will those jobs look like as they evolve, right? Like, they're not going to be the same level of job. They're not going to require as many people. I think they're being honest about what the future is. And I think that's why Wall Street responded so favorably to the move that they made.
I'll push back a little bit on that and just say that I think the Ford, I was thrilled that the train station, is back in play here in that whole Corktown area, which took so long to develop after Tiger Stadium came out, finally just, caught fire. So I think it's great. And I think there will be jobs there, but I think the majority of those jobs are going to end up down in Tennessee and places like that. And I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but
we'll see. We'll see where it all goes.
And look, that a lot of there's still jobs going overseas to India, the car companies. So I mean, as Michigan, I was talking about it with somebody yesterday that we need to make sure, back in the day, Coleman Young played cards with Max Fisher and Hank the Deuce. It was about relationships. I have no idea what the relationships are with the auto companies, but Whitmer has to be having dinner with some of these people and calling up and just bullshitting occasionally, saying, "Hey, just called, say hello," or whatever. I mean, it sounds silly, but
no, relationships matter. There's one thing I learned,
and you saw that
for a while.
Yeah, you're right. Hey, what's up?
You're absolutely right.
You saw that in the mayor's office. I mean,
one thing that the mayor actually kind of prided himself on doing was, and he tells this story. I hope I'm not speaking out of school, but when GM was looking at shutting down all those plants and they were doing stuff across the Midwest, and I believe one of our plants was on the list. I think it was Hamtramck initially.
Hamtramck. It was Hamtramck.
And, the mayor reached out and called and was like, "Hey, I want to let's talk. I wish I'd known first. Is there something I could do? And I think part of the conversation was that there weren't other people most of the people wanted to publicly blast GM, not necessarily call directly and say, hey, what can we do? And then you look at the product of that, you now have Factory Zero, is basically what the Hamtramck plant's being transformed into to produce the electric Hummer. Just there's those relationships, and having open dialogue really, really makes a difference.
Does the electric Hummer drive you insane, Nancy?
No, what I was going to say is I can't believe that Alexis worried that she was talking out of school and telling this incredibly flattering story about her former boss. He's so handsome.
Right, I hope I'm not spilling anything by saying how brilliant he is.
I want to hear her stories after a few of those Punchki vodkas.
I want to say one thing about the Ford thing, which I thought was interesting. If I understood global business and had enough intelligence and knowledge to comment on it, I would not be working for Deadline Detroit. But the one thing I did find was really interesting when I read the stories yesterday was that they're actually going to separate the dealers as well. And for a lot of good reasons, but somebody said something like the customers for EVs and Ford F-150 pickup trucks are completely different, and so they're going to need and want different kind of dealers for that. And I have a friend who was telling me that he had seen a post on some social media post about the F-150 Lightning, the electric pickup truck, and he said that the angry comments from people who consider themselves like F-150 superfans were just amazing. That thing's not a truck. That thing's just that's just a jumped up
battery on wheels.
Exactly. And it's like, talk about our divide. I mean, Joel was talking about the nation's divide. I mean, that is a big one right there. I mean, people who see that your choice of, an electric vehicle as some sort of proof that you're just some kind of liberal squish, instead of just somebody who doesn't
but having different dealers, I mean, the last time I think, wasn't that called segregation?
Yeah. Is there kind of like a secret strategy of saying who's going to be like, what dealers are going to be dinosaurs?
Well, I mean, it's like
the electric.
It's red state, blue state, isn't it? It's red state, blue state.
Really interesting to see how they do that.
Blue. Yeah. Hey, Alan, I mean, along with this idea that they may move down to Tennessee, you think they'll take the Lions with them?
We can only hope. We'll trade. We'll take the Tennessee team.
What about, though, that, I mean,
I thought you were going to ask me another question about Nixon. I was worried.
Well, close. It is
then
about
you can really tell another story. I love you, Alan.
It is about a president. So President Biden is looking to ramp up Buy American requirements to 75% by the year 2029. And you mentioned this idea about some of the auto sector moving to India. Do you think that this is going to have a reverse polarity then?
I don't know. There's still, I don't know. There's
as long as
a
the
lot
company
of
is
jobs
based here, I think they can get away with it. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, look, they're still.
I think it could be a good thing.
I think Ford is still making making cars in Mexico. There's still, the labor is still cheaper overseas. It's.
I was going to say, are we going to end up seeing an increase in prices because more is Buy American? But at the same time, if I guess, I mean, wages should be going up, right? And you have more people working in these good paying jobs and all that kind of stuff, so we can afford a little bit more. But I think if we look at what happened with the bridge blockade and such, I think it's so important to make sure that we continue to double down on what we produce here.
Right. And the chips.
Yeah.
Not the kind that I like, but
better made.
the kettle version. So I got to ask this before we move on to our last segment. Next month, I mean, and this is really resonant here in Michigan, we commemorate, of course, something very sacred, where we are delivered from the bondage of winter. I'm talking about baseball season. Are we going to have an opening day at Comerica Park with the negotiations stalled for Major League Baseball?
Someday.
We're not going to have the opening day,
but it won't be as scheduled presently.
Right.
You know what's interesting about baseball? I think it's I played Little League, played ball my whole life. It is a boring sport to watch. I can maybe last 3 innings. And I've been watching soccer, and I think soccer is going to take over baseball because it's exciting, and I think these guys keep killing the golden goose, man. You got a nice deal right now. You're making revenues, and you're going to stop play. Something's going to take that vacuum, right? There's going to be, I'll watch
Well, people are already not into baseball like they used to.
Yeah.
No. And my father, took me to a zillion games. And it was like that. It's the third inning. I'm 10. You're killing me here. I already have so much Pepsi. So I think it's a huge. These guys got to come together quick.
Right.
Because this game is
a game
for 100 years ago. It's not a game for today.
It would be as stupid as the Detroit newspapers going on strike in the mid-'90s and staying out. Yes, exactly. And staying out as long as they did, just as the internet was dawning and people were figuring out they could get their news from almost anywhere in the world. But
for free.
I don't want to harsh like Allan's origin story that I've heard.
We'll disagree with that one, but
I
what I'll say about baseball is that as I get older, maybe it's just whatever. I am fascinated by watching a good pitcher work pitches with the accuracy of a rock, throwing a rock with the accuracy of this small little part. And I'm still also fascinated that people can hit that rock at that speed. And so to me, when you particularly see a good pitcher like Verlander or any of these guys out here, I still find it fascinating. I find it fascinating that people can hit the ball at all. Unfortunately, like guys watching Cabrera isn't as much fun anymore. I mean, the guy's still making $30 million, $33 million a year, and he's batting .260.
Yeah, but it takes.
And he'll still make a Hall of Fame.
To get, it just takes too long in between pitches. I mean, the game goes on. It's insufferable. It goes on for so long.
There are a lot of things you can
speed
do.
that game up. Let's get a shot clock going. Pitch within 25 seconds. Let's move.
Yeah.
Everything's
or
have
more than one pitcher pitch at the same time.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Or let you throw the ball at the
like standing next to each other, or like throwing it at each other.
2 pitchers mount. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be it.
Or maybe a pitcher's on the mound and the other team gets to have someone on the mound trash talking the pitcher as he's throwing.
There's like another show going on,
right?
Like during the whole game.
And eventually they fight because the trash talker says something really mean.
Everything American. Eventually they fight.
Hey, we can get Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene at every game.
So funny.
And by the way, Nancy, I mean, I'm a little disappointed in you mentioning strikes. The most consequential strike in the last 40 years in the United States was the Hollywood writers' strike, which delayed our ability to know who shot JR back in 1980. That was cruel.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
And then the Detroit newspaper strike.
Cancel your subscription, everybody. Cancel your subscription. That was a real boss move.
All right. You come from Ohio, you don't get it. A right to work state, you come here. So,
this is the home of the strike.
It was a blue state when I left Ohio. Okay, I don't know what happened.
Wait, save the trash talking for the pitcher's mound.
Okay.
That is a great idea.
Fighting.
Okay.
I like that idea.
And now we go to...
And now it's time for Deadline Detroit's nominees for Schmuck of the Week.
Let me just go ahead and give a disclaimer. It would do deference to Alexis. It is also Schnook of the Week.
Schnook. I like that.
Yeah, because I know
that.
you're not too fond of the other S word.
I don't like calling no, Schnook. I like that. I also had putts. Remember, putts felt really
Putts is good.
Yes.
That's a good
too.
Jackie Mason.
Jackie
Mason. He'd be like, he's a putts, the biggest, the best. So.
Well, this way, Alexis, if you wanted to be genteel and gentile, you can go for.
Yes, I like that. That was clever.
Why don't we start with you? Who's your Schnook of the Week?
Why start with me? I need time to think. I like to go towards the end.
Okay.
I'm ready.
Nancy's ready.
I am prepared. Okay, I'm prepared. My schmuck, who is definitely a schmuck this week, is Kentucky Representative Danny Bentley. That's his name. And he's an old man who looks like Colonel Sanders. He has white hair and a little goatee.
Oh yeah.
You know how I love how this is a very Jewish-centered show with Allan Lengel and usually one of his 10,000 Jewish lawyer friends on the panel. Yeah, so we got 2 on this panel of 5.
We only have 2 today.
Yeah. Yesterday they were.
I learned Yiddish here.
Okay. Exactly. Yes, I learned
Where you
a
got
lot
to come
of
back.
Yiddish.
Yeah.
So okay. So there was an anti-abortion bill that was being debated on Wednesday afternoon. The first thing he did was talk about RU-486 or mifepristone, which is the drug that is given to women in medical abortions. He claimed that it was developed during World War II and was called Zyklon B, which is the gas that was used in the Holocaust to kill millions. So first he screwed that part up. Then he said something about, do you know that a Jewish woman has less cancer of the cervix than any race, other race in this country or this world?
Wow.
And why is that? Does anybody want to guess why that is? Because the Jewish women only have one sex partner. They don't have multiple sex partners. So
You didn't go to Michigan, clearly. But okay.
So shout out to all of
What
my
is happening?
promiscuous Jewish sisters who are
Breaking the mold.
exactly.
Wow.
So this
Our
is like
women are pure.
yeah, exactly. So
How dare you?
only one sex partner. So
That's
why.
Jimmy the Greek on steroids.
Yeah, and then of course he's giving the usual half-ass. He sounds like he's just kind of like senile. He's like, I certainly meant no harm. But,
I like when you refer to the Hebrew people. I love
Yeah.
that. How would you brought up the Hebrew tribe? Let's get into some of that.
race. So anyway, so that's me. So okay.
Oh, that's going to be hard to top. Joel.
I'm going. I mean, mine is not even creative. I was going with Boebert or whatever, Lauren. I couldn't stand her, and she screamed, and so yes, that my schmuck. And it's apparent why, and it's not very creative, and I apologize, but she just stands out to me as deserving some sort of emphasis.
It's like they could have been on Wayne's World. Those 2. It's like.
So I need a fatwa on this one, Alan. Would that make her shiksa of the week or what?
I think Marjorie Taylor Greene is more the shiksa. Blonde would be more stereotypical shiksa. Yes, but both would qualify as shiksas or shiksai, whatever the plural would be.
You mean you're bringing Latin into Yiddish?
Well, it's an amalgamation of languages so far. Yes,
it's a portmanteau.
Yes. This show has like so many smart people. I just feel like all of the things you guys like, you start to kind of like get over my head of it.
We've just been to way too many delis while you're sitting there with your vodkas.
We've heard too many people complain in wine over
There you
a
go.
lifetime. You call this good beef? Okay.
I'm going to go with our who we mentioned before, Ron DeSantis. I find a lot of stuff that he does really appalling, but the fact that as we talked about, that he dressed down these kids and tried to shame them that they were wearing masks is really just as you say. Look, there have been doctors who have survived the COVID for in the COVID wards for 2 years wearing masks, and there must be some reason that they're not getting COVID. And so, I mean, for him to make that blanket statement, he's so arrogant. And I think he's the next guy in line next to Trump. I mean, if Trump doesn't run, or he may take on Trump. I mean, Trump is slowly weakening, I think, and I think he is slowly becoming the guy. People down in Florida they love the guy, and we saw that Trump won Florida by way more than he should have. So Florida, there's a lot of people coming from the north down to Florida now. They're attracted to DeSantis and the whole environment there.
My grandmother would tell me that it was a shanda to embarrass anybody publicly. You don't want to shame anybody publicly, and a shanda is a bad thing, Alexis. It's like
I like
shanda.
A
shanda.
Shame.
It's shame in itself.
Shame.
Okay.
And to shame those kids.
Alexis, if you had spent 2 weeks working with Allan Lengel in the same room, you would be able to like order a full, deli platter in Yiddish with the appropriate
way. rye bread, well done. Make sure the corned beef not
Lean.
too lean, not
This
too
is not lean.
I had a
But
very
it's
good
maddening.
friend
and dressing
when I was
on
a
the
little
side.
kid. When I was a child, I had a really good friend who was Jewish, and she would order, like, they had gefilte fish in the house, and I actually liked it.
Oh,
Like, it was kind of like I enjoyed gefilte fish. I felt
I
like
thought
that
it
was
was
kind of a.
taste because
Well,
I've never
see,
seen it.
you're halfway there.
You're honorary already.
I don't know what it
Thank
could
you.
That's
I don't
a
know where it
big
comes
leap.
from.
I think Alexis, that's that song by Katy Perry, "Gefilte Fish," and I liked it.
With horseradish. Yes.
Okay, Alexis, we've given you plenty of time. Who
Okay,
is
yeah.
this
So
company?
so I will go with Schmuck, and I think even worse. I think really when you think about what Putin has done in Ukraine and how he's also simultaneously gone after a nation, but also exposed that his own nation is weaker than everybody would have thought.
Right.
So I think he's my Schmuck. Is there something tougher than Schmuck?
Alan, I don't know.
Flaming
man.
asshole.
Gotta be.
I don't know.
Yeah, I need a Yiddish word for this.
You know,
I'm thinking.
mumser is a Yiddish
Mumser.
word. Mumser means bastard.
Right.
So
He's my mumser of the week.
That's a good usage. By
That's
the
a
way.
good one.
And perfect emphasis and accent.
right, that's
Thank
mumser.
you. Thank
Very
you.
nice. Mhm.
I'm learning.
which is used by an angry man sending back soup at the
Right.
deli.
I was actually on vacation with another family in 9th grade. We were at the ocean there, or the lake, and this little kid, 5 years old, called another European person. He was 5 years old. He called him a mumser, and the parents went crazy. They went, "Who taught Nuti this word? He called me a mumser." It was like a big deal. Where did he learn this word?
And the mom went verklempt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
That
Well,
leaves you.
my schmuck of the week is none other than South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham,
My fave.
who goes on television and asks the question, is there not a Brutus in Russia? Is there not a Colonel Stauffenberg in the Russian military? For those who are not familiar, Colonel Stauffenberg was reprised by Tom Cruise in the movie Valkyrie for being the brave person who was going to try to off Adolf Hitler during World War II. Anyways, Senator Graham is recruiting, jonesing, pimping for somebody in Russia to off Vladimir Putin. That's usually not done by politicians of other countries to world leaders, but that hasn't stopped him from at least making the appeal. So out in left field is it that even Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene categorized this by saying it is dangerous and unhinged. Coming from her.
Well,
Definition of both.
Well,
Marjorie
if anyone
Taylor
knows
Greene probably
dangerous and
has a-
unhinged,
has a crush on Vladimir Putin to begin with, because he's such a good Christian. But there you go.
So basically, she was then covering for him, saying, "Please don't kill him. He's mine."
Will no one rid me of this meddlesome priest? So, yes.
Well, Putin apparently has a thing for rhythmic gymnasts, as do some of his oligarch buddies. So unless she wants to go ahead and get the ball and the twirling twine and find a mat.
Oh, this is all too much. It's too much. It's a Friday afternoon. It's too much. It's too much.
And on that note, I would like to make one announcement. Michael Lucido, who's our producer and our sound and video engineer, will be unfortunately leaving the week that was, but he is moving on to greener pastures. And so, Michael, thank you so much.
he'll be back next week. He's got one more week.
Well, then this is the penultimate week, and I'm just prepping him and all of you for this.
He will be
Shows
one
how much
of
you're
our
going to miss
guests.
him.
There'll be a week of celebration.
He's going to be one of our
Thank you,
guests.
Michael Lucido.
Oh,
Thank you, though.
he's going to be on this side of the camera.
Yeah,
Excellent. Yes, we're going to have Michael go ahead and do that. Who's going to be able to produce the show while he's on this side? God only knows.
Well, we'll have to figure that out.
We'll figure that out.
To be determined.
I have to run, y'all. This is so much fun.
Nice.
Thank you, Alexis.
You guys are all just so smart and so wonderful.
Great to see you again. Joel, thank you for being here. Nancy, as always, welcome back home. And Alan,
drive home safely.
All right. Take care, everybody. Have a great week.
Have a good weekend.